The wind howled across the icy plains of Greenland, where a lonely observatory stood buried in snow like a forgotten monument of the past. Inside, Dr. Alia Voss sat hunched over her terminal, wrapped in a thick coat, her fingers trembling from cold and tiredness as she sifted through endless lines of cosmic noise. Once a rising star in astrophysics, Alia had been exiled to this remote outpost after challenging the official narrative that Earth was alone in the universe. Most scientists had long stopped listening for signals from space. After centuries of silence, they believed there was simply no one out there, but Alia couldn't let it go. Something deep inside her refused to accept that humanity was the only voice in the dark. On the third night of a week-long storm, she noticed something odd, a strange pattern hiding beneath the layers of background radiation. She stared, heart in pounding as the numbers repeated, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, prime numbers. Then came a new line, unfamiliar symbols pulsing like a heartbeat, repeating with eerie precision. She activated the translation software, though it was outdated and barely functional. It struggled, froze, then spat out a crude translation, "Help." Alia leaned back in her chair, breath caught in her throat. This couldn't be real. She played the sequence again. Prime numbers, always the sign of intelligent origin. Someone, something, was out there, and they were asking for help. She immediately sent the data to the Earth Science Network, but the automated reply was dismissive. Signal likely caused by natural radiation interference. Case closed. Furious and desperate, Alia turned to the only person she still trusted, Commander Elias Reyes. He was a legend once, commander of Earth's first interstellar scout program, now retired and hidden away in the back alleys of South America after a mission went wrong. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but this signal was bigger than pride or old wounds. After 3 hours of encrypted channels and stubborn silence, Reyes finally appeared on her screen, grey-bearded and wary. "Alia! Haven't heard that name in a long time." She showed him the signal. He said nothing for a long time, just stared at the data. Then he whispered, "That's not just a message, that's a signature." He explained that decades ago, during a deep space mission, he'd encountered similar prime-based sequences, but they vanished before confirmation. No one believed him. Now it was back, stronger, clearer, and more desperate. Alia's eyes burned with determination. What if they're still out there? What if we're their last hope? Reyes hesitated, then said, "I'll gather what I can, but if this is real, Earth won't help us. They've already given up." Together, they began planning a quiet mission, a rogue launch. Alia dug through old blueprints for decommissioned scout ships, while Reyes contacted buried allies, engineers, linguists, and one peculiar bioengineer with a haunted past. Meanwhile, the signal pulsed again, more frequently now, and with new layers Alia hadn't seen before. Images, shapes, a star map, coordinates pointing to a dead system on the edge of the galaxy, marked centuries ago as unstable and uninhabitable. But the message was clear. Come. One night, as she sat staring at the pulsing signal, the observatory's lights flickered. Her breath misted in the air as static filled her ears, and then, faintly, the sound of a voice. Not human, not machine, but something in between, whispered, "Only you remain." She jumped from her seat, heart hammering, and backed away from the console. The voice didn't return, but it had said enough. Someone, or something, was watching, and they knew her. The next morning, Reyes arrived at the observatory in a rented, suborbital shuttle, battered but ready. "We launch in 2 days," he said, stepping onto the snow-covered deck. "If we wait longer, the window will close." Alia nodded, unable to speak. In her heart, she felt it too. This was bigger than her career, bigger than Earth. The signal wasn't just a call for help. It was a test, and humanity had just been chosen. The wind howled across the icy plains of Greenland where a lonely observatory stood buried in snow like a forgotten monument of the past. Inside, Dr. Alia Voss sat hunched over her terminal, wrapped in a thick coat, her fingers trembling from cold and tiredness as she sifted through endless lines of cosmic noise. Once a rising star in astrophysics, Alia had been exiled to this remote outpost after challenging the official narrative that Earth was alone in the universe. Most scientists had long stopped listening for signals from space. After centuries of silence, they believed there was simply no one out there, but Alia couldn't let it go. Something deep inside her refused to accept that humanity was the only voice in the dark. On the third night of a week-long storm, she noticed something odd, a strange pattern hiding beneath the layers of background radiation. She stared, heart in pounding as the numbers repeated, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, prime numbers. Then came a new line, unfamiliar symbols pulsing like a heartbeat, repeating with eerie precision. She activated the translation software, though it was outdated and barely functional. It struggled, froze, then spat out a crude translation, "Help." Alia leaned back in her chair, breath caught in her throat. This couldn't be real. She played the sequence again. Prime numbers, always the sign of intelligent origin. Someone, something, was out there, and they were asking for help. She immediately sent the data to the Earth Science Network, but the automated reply was dismissive. Signal likely caused by natural radiation interference. Case closed. Furious and desperate, Alia turned to the only person she still trusted, Commander Elias Reyes. He was a legend once, commander of Earth's first interstellar scout program, now retired and hidden away in the back alleys of South America after a mission went wrong. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but this signal was bigger than pride or old wounds. After 3 hours of encrypted channels and stubborn silence, Reyes finally appeared on her screen, grey-bearded and wary. Alia! Haven't heard that name in a long time. She showed him the signal. He said nothing for a long time, just stared at the data. Then he whispered, "That's not just a message, that's a signature." He explained that decades ago, during a deep space mission, he'd encountered similar prime-based sequences, but they vanished before confirmation. No one believed him. Now it was back, stronger, clearer, and more desperate. Alia's eyes burned with determination. What if they're still out there? What if we're their last hope? Reyes hesitated, then said, "I'll gather what I can, but if this is real, Earth won't help us. They've already given up." Together, they began planning a quiet mission, a rogue launch. Alia dug through old blueprints for decommissioned scout ships, while Reyes contacted buried allies, engineers, linguists, and one peculiar bioengineer with a haunted past. Meanwhile, the signal pulsed again, more frequently now, and with new layers Alia hadn't seen before. Images, shapes, a star map, coordinates pointing to a dead system on the edge of the galaxy, marked centuries ago as unstable and uninhabitable. But the message was clear: come. One night, as she sat staring at the pulsing signal, the observatory's lights flickered. Her breath misted in the air as static filled her ears, and then, faintly, the sound of a voice. Not human, not machine, but something in between, whispered, "Only you remain." She jumped from her seat, heart hammering, and backed away from the console. The voice didn't return, but it had said enough. Someone or something was watching, and they knew her. The next morning, Reyes arrived at the observatory in a rented suborbital shuttle, battered but ready. "We launch in 2 days," he said, stepping onto the snow-covered deck. "If we wait longer, the window will close." Alia nodded, unable to speak. In her heart, she felt it too. This was bigger than her career, bigger than Earth. The signal wasn't just a call for help, it was a test. and humanity had just been chosen. Beneath the cracked surface of the ancient Sarathi station, a new passage opened, revealing a wide spiral staircase made of glowing black stone that hummed under, their boots with every step. The crew of the Arcadia descended slowly, the air growing colder and the silence heavier with each level. At the bottom, they entered a vast underground hall filled with shimmering pillars that reached up into the darkness above like frozen lightning. The walls were etched with symbols that pulsed faintly, reacting to their presence. In the center stood the heart of the station, the Seed Vault. It was a massive chamber made of clear crystal, suspended in the air by beams of soft golden light. Inside were millions of crystalline pods, each no larger than a human head, all floating gently in place. The glow from the pods painted the walls in soft blues and silvers. As Alia moved closer, her device picked up a strange field, one of time, space, and memory blended together. She activated the translator again, and words appeared across the room, stretched into the air like holograms. Legacy of life. Awaiting restoration. One by one, the pods came into view, each labeled with a name, a star system, a symbol of a lost race. The Sarathi had preserved the very essence of entire species, their DNA, culture, language, art, and history, all sealed, a way to outlast death. But something was terribly wrong. Most of the pods were dim, cracked, or glowing faint red. As Lena scanned them, she found that nearly 99% of them were marked with the same word: fallen. Only one cluster at the very center remained blue, a pulsing, softly, untouched by decay. When Kiran accessed the core, the system spoke again, in the Sarathi voice, now slower, more damaged. Corruption spread through thought, through silence, not virus, not war, despair. The crew looked at each other, not fully understanding. Then Joel, curious, touched one of the fallen pods. It flickered, then flashed an image directly into his mind, a great city floating above the clouds, then suddenly going dark, its people standing still, eyes blank, as their world slowly collapsed. He pulled his hand back, shaking. "It wasn't an attack," he said, his voice tight. "They just stopped trying." Alia looked around, her mind racing. The silence. It's not a weapon, it's an idea. A loss of purpose so strong it spreads like a sickness, a reason to give up encoded into thought. Reyes nodded slowly. And the Sarathi couldn't fight it. None of them could. The Sarathi had stored the last of each species before they gave in, hoping one day someone would find the vault and awaken them, but not just anyone, only someone who remained uncorrupted. That's why the signal came to Earth. The Sarathi had watched humanity from afar and believed that even in chaos, humans always kept moving forward. Even in fear, they refused to surrender. Now, the last hope of the galaxy was inside this room, and the key to restoring it was in their hands. But there was a cost. To unlock the Seed Vault, they would have to prove that humans were still different, still resistant to the silence. A test would be triggered, one that the Sarathi had built into the system long ago. Lena stepped closer to the central console and placed her hand on it. The console pulsed, then scanned her palm, and suddenly alarms echoed through the chamber. A new message appeared in sharp red lines. Genome match detected. Trial protocol active. The crew stared at Lena, confused. She looked just as stunned. I don't know what this means, she stammered. But the system responded for her. Subject lineage, human-modified Sarathi hybrid. Experimental caretaker class. Activation required. Reyes turned sharply. You're not fully human? Lena backed away, shaking her head. I was part of a genetics project. Nothing ever came of it. I didn't know it was connected to them. The Sarathi must have begun preparing humanity long ago, planting seeds in human DNA as a backup plan. And now, that plan was coming alive. The lights shifted, and the floor beneath them opened into 3 separate paths. Trial 1. Mind, said the voice. Trial 2. Mercy. Trial 3. Choice. The crew would have to face all 3. They each stepped onto different platforms, drawn into tunnels lit with soft golden light. Alia and Kiran were sent into a room full of floating data cubes, each containing fragments of Sarathi AI code. They had to rebuild the AI core, but it wasn't logic that solved the puzzle. It was understanding. The AI didn't respond to commands. It responded to empathy, emotion, the ability to see more than just math. As they worked together, understanding the logic behind sorrow and hope, the AI slowly reformed, speaking once more. Purpose remains. Meanwhile, Reyes and Joel were thrown into a simulation, a copy of Earth's history during its worst times. They lived days in seconds, reliving wars, betrayals, and disasters. But the goal wasn't to win. It was to show mercy when they could have punished, to keep going when defeat seemed certain. In one scene, Joel faced the moment his brother vanished and had to let go of blame to move forward. The simulation ended with the words, "You remember why you fight." Deep in the final chamber, Lena faced a terrible decision. The system offered her full activation, turning her into what the Sarathi once designed her to be, the perfect caretaker of the vault, enhanced and immortal, but no longer fully human. Or she could reject it, remain as she was, flawed and fragile, but real. She stepped back from the machine. "I'm human enough," she whispered. The chamber glowed white, and all 3 trials ended. The crew reunited in the central vault, and the crystals began to sing, a low hum rising into a powerful vibration. A beam of light shot through the ceiling, sending a signal far beyond the stars. The seed vault was awake, but with it, another force stirred. From the edge of the system, distant dark shapes began to move, drawn to the signal like moths to a flame. The silence was not dead. It had been waiting. Alia looked up at the stars, now blinking with new messages, some friendly, some unknown. "We've lit the fire," she said. "Now the galaxy will come." And in that moment, deep in the vault, the last Sarathi memory spoke again. "You chose hope. You may now carry it." The air inside the Sarathi vault grew heavier as the light from the crystals faded, and a deep rumble echoed through the chamber, shaking the floor beneath the crew's feet, as if the station itself had awakened fully for the first time in 1,000 years. Alia, Reyes, Lena, Kiran, and Joel stood together at the heart of the seed vault, watching as the main console displayed a new message written in clear, sharp glyphs. Final test initiated. Trial of fire and thought. Before they could react, the vault split open beneath them, and each of them was pulled into a narrow beam of golden light that moved so fast it was like falling through a tunnel of stars. They landed alone, each in a separate chamber, with walls made of shifting light and mirrors that reflected not just their faces, but their fears, their memories, and their doubts. Alia found herself in a room where the stars blinked in patterns across the sky above her, and an ancient Sarathi voice spoke directly into her thoughts, saying, "Your trial is thought, not knowledge. Understand or fade." Before her, 3 projections appeared, one of Earth, shining bright and full of life, one of a dark planet, silent and hollow, and one that shifted constantly, never settling into a clear form. She was asked one question: which one is the future? Alia stared, confused, realizing the test wasn't asking her to guess, but to choose, based on belief. She stepped toward the unstable image, saying softly, "The future is not fixed. It depends on what we do now." The projection solidified, showing Earth surrounded by new stars. Her trial ended in light. Meanwhile, Reyes was surrounded by fire. His room was a battlefield filled with the sounds of gunfire, smoke, and cries. The Serathi voice told him, "You survived war, but did you learn peace?" Figures from his past emerged, soldiers he had led, mistakes he had made, people he could not save. A burning city stood before him, and the voice offered him two options: restore it by sacrificing a part of himself, or walk away and preserve his strength. He walked into the fire, knowing the pain would return, and rebuilt what he could with trembling hands. The flames faded, and a quiet message appeared in the smoke. To protect, you must first heal. For Lena, her trial was different. She was placed in a lab much like the one from her past, the place where her genes had been altered, where people once saw her as an experiment rather than a person. Around her were copies of herself, each showing a version she could have become. One with no emotions, one with complete power, one that had joined the silence. The voice asked, "Who are you, truly?" She stepped forward and shattered the reflections, saying, "I'm not what was made. I'm what I chose to be." Her chamber dissolved into light. Joel's chamber was filled with darkness. No sound, no direction, only a single voice. "Your brother called from this place. What will you do?" A figure appeared in the darkness, his brother's face lit by faint blue light. Joel wanted to run forward, to embrace him, but the voice warned him, "This is not rescue, this is memory." He reached out anyway, and the image flickered into static, leaving behind only a small glowing sphere. He picked it up and whispered, "I will carry you with me." The room opened, releasing him. Kieran, however, faced the most difficult path. His trial was built from questions with no answers. Symbols scrolled around him, languages from 1,000 fallen races, and the voice simply said, "Connect them. If not with knowledge, then with faith." For hours, or maybe seconds, he moved through puzzles that bent time and thought, each more strange than the last. Finally, he saw something familiar, the first signal that Alia had found, pulsing gently. He realized the message wasn't in words or images, it was music, emotion. He sang it softly, and the chamber replied with a harmony that lit up every glyph. "You remembered the song of the stars," the voice said. When the trials ended, the crew found themselves back in the vault, standing together once more. The room had changed. It was brighter now, cleaner, as if it had accepted them. A staircase rose from the floor, leading to a final platform with a glowing sphere at its center, the heart of the vault. The Serathi voice, now steady, spoke aloud for all to hear. "You have passed through fire. You have answered thought. You carry will where others surrendered. The vault is yours to guide." But before they could touch the heart, alarms blared across the station. The dark shapes that had been drifting at the edge of the system were now moving fast, forming into patterns that looked like war fleets. One ship larger than the rest broke away and sent a pulse through space. The translator struggled, then produced a single word: silence. The enemy had awakened. Not a species, not a machine, but an idea, given form through lost minds and abandoned wills. It had no leaders, no armies in the traditional sense, just ships filled with echoes of civilizations that had given up, now working together under one purpose: to end what remained. Reyes barked orders. "Get back to the ship, we need to move the vault." But Alia stopped him. "We can't move it, we are the vault now. Wherever we go, the knowledge goes with us." Lena nodded. "But we can protect it. If we link the B. Arcadia systems to the vault, we can transmit a counter-signal, a message of resistance. It might block the silence for a time." Kieran and Joel rushed to connect the ship's core to the vault, wires glowing, systems humming. Alia stood at the heart and pressed her hand against it. Images of every lost world flooded her mind, followed by the image of Earth, still burning, still alive. She whispered the new message: "We are not done." The vault lit up, sending out waves of light across the system, striking the first of the enemy ships. They paused, shook, and one by one began to pull back, confused. But the largest ship pressed forward, undeterred. "It's coming straight for us," Joel shouted. Reyes stepped toward the ship's weapons console. "Then we buy time." Alia stopped him. "No, we do this together." The crew stood side by side as the vault activated a defense it had never used. Waves of memory, sound, and light bursting outward like a song, not of war, but of defiance. The massive ship paused, shook, and then slowly began to dissolve into thousands of tiny fragments, each one carrying a new message. Hope remains. The vault quieted. The system fell still. And deep in the center of it all, the Sarathi. A voice whispered once more, "The fire is lit, now guide its flame." The stars above the ancient Sarathi vault pulsed like silent beacons, each one echoing the message that had just been sent across the galaxy. Hope remains. But as the Arcadia drifted slowly in orbit, cloaked in golden light, the silence that followed felt heavier than any before, and the crew could sense that something had changed, something deep and unseen, like a breath held just beyond hearing. Elia stood near the vault's core, watching faint streams of data swirl above her like fireflies, each thread carrying memories, languages, songs, and visions of extinct worlds. And though she had passed the trials, though she had touched the heart and lived, she could still feel the weight of something pressing against her thoughts, a soft pressure, not of fear, but of something older. Doubt. Reyes moved through the Arcadia's bridge, checking systems, rerouting power, preparing for what might come next, his every step calm but his eyes sharp, knowing they were not safe yet, not while the silence still lingered beyond the edge of the stars, not while it still whispered to those who had once belonged to it. Kiran and Joel worked deep in the ship's engine room, linking the vault's memory crystals to the Arcadia's long-range communications, creating a new kind of signal, a living pulse made from music, memory, and thought, a beacon not only to call allies, but to remind the galaxy that purpose was not lost. Lena, however, sat alone in the chamber where she had faced her reflection, now filled with soft blue light and drifting particles of information, her hand resting on the console that had once tried to change her. And though she was afraid, she was not broken. She had chosen her path, and now that choice was echoing into every system around her. Outside, near the edge of the solar field, a strange pulse returned, not from the silence this time, but from something else, something unfamiliar and old, a beacon locked in orbit around a dead star, pulsing with a pattern that was not Sarathi, not human, and not known to any of their data archives. When the pulse struck the Arcadia's systems, it didn't damage them. Instead, it awakened something hidden in the vault's memory, a sealed layer that had been locked away even from the Sarathi themselves. And the heart began to glow again, spinning faster, speaking in voices none of the crew recognized, overlapping languages that sounded both alien and familiar, like the echoes of dreams long forgotten. Alia touched the console, trying to translate, and slowly the words formed. The first ones left not only knowledge, but warning. Beneath all life lies the echo of purpose. If it fades, all fades. The room dimmed, and a new vision poured from the vault. A map of the galaxy, not as it was, but as it had been, filled with hundreds of bright civilizations, each marked by symbols and light. And then slowly, one by one, they dimmed, turned black, and vanished until only Earth remained, flickering in the center, surrounded by emptiness. The crew watched in silence, the weight of what they were seeing sinking in. This was not just about the silence or the vault or the Sarathi. This was about something older, something deeper, a force that had haunted the galaxy for longer than any race had dared remember. And it had a name now, the Echo, a slow unraveling of meaning that consumed thought, crushed progress, and left only quiet behind. Joel, staring at the fading lights, whispered, "This thing, it doesn't kill, it convinces." And the truth hit them all. Civilizations didn't fall to war, but to forgetting why they mattered. Reyes stepped forward, fists clenched, voice low. "So what do we do? Light a fire under the stars and hope someone sees it?" And Alia turned to him, her eyes bright with sudden clarity. "No, we carry it to them." And that was when the vault shifted again, revealing a hidden core that none of them had seen before. A massive chamber filled with what looked like ships, not Sarathi in design, but simpler, stronger, made for speed, and shaped like birds in flight. The vault had prepared vessels for this day, knowing that one beacon was not enough, that someone would have to go world by world, race by race, reigniting what had been lost. The message from the old satellite pulsed again, and now they understood. It was not a warning, but a call to action from some long-forgotten watcher, perhaps a last outpost of a race that had resisted the silence long before them. Lena stepped forward, her voice calm. "We're not just survivors now, we're carriers of purpose," and each of them felt the truth settle into their bones like a second heartbeat. They had survived the fire and the thought, but now they had to face the hardest trial of all, not fighting back, but spreading meaning in a place that had forgotten what it was. The ships in the chamber hummed as they powered up, each linked to the vault, each carrying fragments of the seed memory, ready to travel into the unknown. The crew stood in the hangar, knowing they would soon split, each heading toward a different star, not as soldiers, but as reminders, as stories reborn. Alia turned to Reyes, her voice quiet. "We may never see each other again." And he smiled faintly. "If we do our jobs, we won't have to, because others will remember." And with that, the ships began to rise, the vault opening its outer shell to reveal the stars, and for a moment just before they launched, they all heard it, the faint echo of purpose, not from the Sarathi, not from Earth, but from deep within themselves, a sound like a memory waking up, a promise that no matter how far the silence reached, it would never be the only voice in the dark again. The stars looked different now, not because they had changed, but because Alia saw them with new eyes as her ship, small, sleek and alive with Sarathi design, moved through the quiet dark of space, following a path left by the ancient vault, its trail invisible to most, but clear to those who listened not just with instruments but with memory and belief. Behind her, the vault still orbited the dead world, guarded by the Arcadia and Reyes, who had stayed behind to protect the source of it all, while the others had scattered like sparks across the galaxy, each carrying a part of the vault's message, each aflame in the long night. Alia's destination was an old system once marked as lost, a place called Venar, where a civilization had vanished 400 years ago after sending one final message. "We no longer remember why we began." The words haunted her even now, echoing like a whisper across the walls of her ship, and though the engines were quiet and the journey smooth, she felt a weight in her chest that no system reading could explain, as if something out there was watching, waiting, deciding whether to snuff out this last attempt or allow it through. When she arrived, the system was dim, its sun flickering weakly as if tired of burning, and around the fourth planet she saw the ruins, dozens of satellites, broken and silent, drifting in patterns that once had meaning, but now floated like forgotten bones. Her ship's scanners found a faint pulse on the surface, buried deep beneath the planet's surface, and she landed her vessel near a massive structure half swallowed by dust and ash, shaped like a circle split by jagged lines, almost like a wound that had never healed. Inside, the darkness was thick and the silence heavy, but as she walked, the vault crystal at her chest began to glow, guiding her deeper into the heart of the ruins, where a strange machine stood alone in a chamber of stone and glass. A beacon, ancient and cracked, but still pulsing faintly. She placed the crystal on its surface, and it lit up with sudden force, flooding the room with a memory not hers, a time when Venar was filled with life, when the cities were bright and voices laughed under silver skies, when stories mattered. and purpose burned in every heart. Then came the fading, the same slow drift into quiet, as people lost their reasons, as machines ran without commands, as the stars above became distant strangers. The beacon had been left behind, not as a warning, but as a cry, hoping one day someone would come and remind them what they had lost. Alia stood in that moment, holding the vault's fire in her hands, and whispered, "You are not forgotten." And with that, the beacon surged, sending a wave across the surface of the planet that reawakened old machines, powered ancient lights, and triggered a signal into deep space. Far away, on another edge of the galaxy, Lena received the signal and smiled, knowing one more light had been rekindled. On another world, Joel found a derelict station filled with drifting minds, people who had forgotten who they were, and with the vault's echo, he played a song, just a song, and slowly they wept and remembered. Kieran stood before a council of beings who had lived in silence for decades, their beliefs shattered by war, and he spoke not in grand speeches, but in small truths. That even the smallest story has meaning if someone chooses to carry it. And Reyes, watching the signals spread from the Arcadia, knew they were no longer just explorers, but the first of a new path, a kind of healer for the galaxy's soul. But even as the light spread, the silence stirred again, not in ships or weapons this time, but in doubt, in shadows, in strange signals that tried to twist the vault's messages into despair, whispering false words into recovered systems, suggesting that it was too late, that memory was not enough, that the end had already come. Alia heard those whispers too, deep in her mind, but she answered not with anger, but with certainty, by activating another ancient structure hidden in Venar's crust, a second beacon, stronger, louder, filled with human and Sarathi memories, joined into a new harmony. She broadcasted the stories of Earth, not the wars or the machines, but the songs, the dreams, the moments when people chose to rise when falling seemed easier, and in doing so, she turned the silence's own tool, doubt, into strength, showing that it was because things could be lost that they were worth protecting. Across space, more worlds answered, some with lights, some with questions, some with cautious hope, and one by one, the old map that had shown only darkness now flickered with hundreds of new points of light. Not all bright, not all loud, but alive. Alia stood under Venar's sky as dawn broke, her ship glowing softly behind her, the signal strong now, reaching beyond even what the vault had once imagined. And in that moment, she understood what the vault had truly meant by the beacon of tomorrow. Not a machine, not a place, but people who chose to carry purpose even when the galaxy had forgotten how. As she returned to her ship, preparing to travel to the next world, she sent a message to Reyes and the others, simple and clear. The light spreads. We are no longer alone.